Your position is being eliminated. The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest, but I kept my face neutral. Rick Mathers, they called me. Senior manufacturing engineer, 25 years at Hanford Industrial, and this is how it ends. With Brad Morrison, a kid who couldn't tell a torque wrench from a tire iron, delivering my death sentence with Harvard MBA confidence. Your position as senior manufacturing engineer is being eliminated as part of our efficiency optimization initiative, he continued, sliding a paper across the conference room table like he was doing me a favor. Behind him, Julie from HR clutched her paperwork like a life preserver, eyes fixed anywhere but on mine. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead like angry wasps. 25 years of 60-hour weeks, missed dinners, and sleeping under my desk during equipment failures. And this is how it ends. However, Brad continued, we'd like to offer you a consulting position. You'd help train our new offshore engineering team to take over operations. 6-month contract, half your current salary. I stared at him, then at the paper. They wanted me to train my own replacements, to take everything I had built, every process I'd perfected, every relationship I'd forged with our clients, and hand it over to a team of strangers who'd work for pennies on the dollar. Let me understand this, I said, my voice steady as a machinist's level. You want me to teach someone else how to do my job, then walk away? Think of it as knowledge transfer, Brad said, like he was doing me a favor. Your expertise would be invaluable during the transition. I watched him fidget with his Mont Blanc pen, probably cost more than my monthly truck payment. For just a second, something flickered behind his eyes. Not malice, but something else. Fear, maybe, or doubt. I'll think it over, I said. Julie slid the folder across the table like she was passing me a death certificate. The offer is effective immediately. Immediately. Same responsibilities, same deadlines, same midnight emergency calls, but for half the money and with the added pleasure of training my executioners. I stood up, grabbed the folder, and walked out of that room. The second those glass doors closed behind me, my hands started shaking. I drove straight home in my '97 F-150, the one I'd been meaning to replace for 3 years but never found the time. Sat in my driveway for an hour, engine off, staring at the garage where my tools waited. Tools my father had given me, tools I'd collected over a quarter century of honest work. Tools that suddenly felt like relics from a dead civilization. That night, I sat Liam and Max down at the kitchen table, both of them looking at me like I'd called a family meeting to announce I had cancer. Boys, there's going to be some changes at work, I started, then stopped. How do you explain to a 16-year-old and a 12-year-old that their dad just got kicked in the teeth by a system he'd served faithfully for 25 years? Are we going to be okay? Liam asked, and the worry in his voice cut deeper than Brad Morrison's corporate speak. Yeah, son, we're going to be okay. But it might get bumpy for a while. Max, my 12-year-old engineer, looked up from his Lego creation. Dad, are you scared? I thought about lying, giving him some reassuring adult nonsense. Instead, I said, yeah, buddy, I'm scared, but scared doesn't mean beat. After the boys went to bed, I sat alone at the kitchen table where Sarah and I used to plan our future over late-night coffee. We'd met at Hanford 28 years ago. She was a quality inspector. I was a junior machinist trying to impress her with my precision measurements. Sarah made me promise to keep the boys steady. Even dying, she worried about them more than herself. The second mortgage we'd taken for her treatment still hung over us. And here I was considering throwing away the only steady income I had left. My phone buzzed the next morning. Vernon Kowalski. Hadn't heard from him since he'd taken early retirement 6 months ago. Smart bastard, got out before the axe fell. Rick! Vern's gravelly voice filled the cab of my truck. You seen LinkedIn lately? I laughed, but there wasn't much humor in it. Been too busy trying to keep my head above water, Vern. Well, you should check it. Also, you might want to look at who's been calling around, asking questions about Hanford's client retention. That got my attention. What kind of questions? The kind that suggests some folks aren't too happy with the new management style. Jim Grayson called me yesterday. Said his parts orders have been screwed up 3 times since the acquisition. Asked if I knew anyone who actually understood precision manufacturing. Jim Grayson. Grayson Global Automotive had been our biggest client for 8 years. I'd personally handled their account since day one, worked with Jim to develop custom solutions that saved his company millions. If Jim was asking around, that meant Daxon's efficiency optimization was already failing. You interested in hearing more? Vern asked. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of 25 years pressing down on my shoulders. In the rearview mirror, I could see Liam heading to school, backpack slung over his shoulder, walking with the casual confidence of a kid who still believed his dad could fix anything. Yeah, Vern, I'm interested. That afternoon, I walked back into Hanford like I owned the place. My badge still worked. Guess they hadn't flagged me yet. The machine floor hummed with familiar sounds. Hydraulic presses, CNC mills, the rhythmic thump of the stamping line. But something felt different. Smaller crew, and the guys who were left looked like they were walking on eggshells. Jesse Martinez, one of my best machinists, caught my eye and shook his head slightly. Later, by the coffee machine, he filled me in. "They've got us filling out timesheets every 15 minutes, he said, glancing around like he was sharing state secrets. Morrison wants to know exactly how long each operation takes, down to the second. Yesterday, he asked me why bearing installation took 12 minutes instead of 10. What did you tell him? That some bearings fight you and you can't rush precision. He wrote it down like I was speaking Chinese. I found Morrison in conference room B, pecking at his laptop like he was composing symphonies. He looked up when I walked in, but this time his practiced smile seemed forced. "Rick, I'm hoping you've had time to consider our offer." I sat down across from him, folder in my hands. "Got a few questions first." His smile flickered. "This isn't really a negotiation. Who's taking point on the Grayson contract renewal next month?" "That's being handled by our new efficiency team. These people ever work with precision manufacturing before? They're highly trained professionals with extensive backgrounds in operational optimization." I leaned back in my chair. "That's not what I asked, Brad." For a moment, his corporate mask slipped. He rubbed his temples, and I caught a glimpse of something I hadn't expected: exhaustion. When he looked back up, his voice was quieter. "Look, Rick, I know this isn't ideal, but the board wants 15% cost reduction across all divisions. I've got 6 weeks to show results, or they'll find someone who can." There it was. Kid wasn't evil, just trapped in the same machine that was grinding up all of us. "And you think replacing experience with algorithms is the answer?" "I think I'm trying to save as many jobs as I can while making the numbers work." He straightened up, the corporate armor sliding back into place. "So what's your answer?" I opened the folder and pulled out the resignation letter I'd written at 3 a.m. "I'm not accepting your offer. I'm resigning, effective immediately." Morrison's face went pale. "Rick, wait, maybe we can Section 7B of my original contract. No notice required in the event of major compensation changes." I stood up, buttoned my jacket. "I haven't taken anything that isn't mine. Haven't copied a single file. All I'm walking out with is my reputation and the relationships I built. Those are mine." I headed for the door, then paused. "Brad? When this efficiency optimization blows up in your face, remember that some of us tried to tell you there's a difference between cost and value." That night, I sat in my garage with a beer and my father's toolbox, staring at the bills spread across my workbench. Mortgage, car payment, Liam's baseball camp, Max's school supplies. Numbers that didn't give a damn about my wounded pride or my theories about the dignity of honest work. The mortgage company had already called twice this week. "Mr. Mathers, we understand your situation, but we need to discuss payment options." This house was the last thing connecting us to Sarah. The kitchen where she'd taught Max to bake. The garage where she'd helped Liam learn to change oil. The next morning, I drove to Kowalski's Pawn and Loan with my father's vintage Starrett micrometer set. 3 generations of precision measurement, from wartime aircraft to space program components to my own apprenticeship projects. "These are museum pieces," Eddie Kowalski said, running his fingers over the brushed steel. "But I can only give you $350 for the set. $350 for tools that had measured tolerances for moonshots." I signed the papers anyway. When I got home, Max was at the kitchen table with a calculator and our bills. 12 years old, trying to figure out how to help his dad keep the lights on. "Dad, if we cancel cable and I don't do soccer this year, Max, stop." But the fact that he was thinking about it broke something inside me. At 3 a.m., I picked up my phone and scrolled to Brad Morrison's number. Maybe that consulting job wasn't so bad after all. Maybe pride was a luxury I couldn't afford with 2 kids depending on me. The phone rang once before I hung up. Outside, a freight train rumbled past, carrying steel and dreams to somewhere else. Instead, I called Vernon. "You awake, old man?" "Been waiting for your call," Vern said. "Figured you'd need to hit bottom before you'd listen to what I really wanted to tell you." "I'm listening." "Jim Grayson wants to meet with you tomorrow. So does Frank Williams from Kentrotech." "But Rick, they're not looking for another vendor. They're looking for a partner. Someone who understands that manufacturing isn't just about making parts. It's about solving problems." I met Jim Grayson at his office the next day, surrounded by 3 decades of automotive history. Pictures of muscle cars, racing trophies, and handshake deals that built an empire. Big Jim himself looked like he'd stepped out of a Hemingway novel. 60 years old, hands like ham hocks, and eyes that could see through corporate bullshit from a mile away. "Rick," he said, not bothering with pleasantries, "what the hell is going on over at Hanford? They optimized me out of a job." Jim snorted. "Optimized? Christ, I hate that word. You know what I got yesterday? A call from some kid telling me that my custom bearing specifications were outside normal parameters and suggesting I switch to standard parts. Standard parts, Rick, for a custom racing application. What did you tell him? I told him to call me back when he figured out the difference between cheap and cost-effective. Jim leaned back in his chair. Rick, I've been in this business for 35 years. Built this company from nothing. And the one thing I've learned is that you can't manufacture trust. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a folder, but kept his hand on it. Now, before we go any further, I need to ask you something. Are you planning to start your own shop? Thinking about it. Because if you are, I need to know you're serious. I'm not interested in being someone's practice run. His eyes bored into mine. I've got 6 other suppliers who can make parts cheaper than Hanford. Hell, I've got 12 who can make them faster. But you know what none of them can do? What's that? They can't look at a blueprint and spot the flaw that would cost me $1 million in recalls. They can't understand that when I say I need something done right, I mean right, not efficient. Jim slid the folder across his desk but kept his finger on it. This represents 6 months of work for a good-sized shop, but it's all custom, all precision, all the stuff that requires actual thinking instead of just following procedures. You screw this up, I'm done with you forever. You do it right, we'll talk about the next phase. I opened the folder. Purchase orders, specifications, delivery schedules. Enough work to keep a small shop busy, but not enough to guarantee success. I don't have a shop yet, Jim. I know. That's why this is a leap of faith for both of us. 2 weeks later, I stood in a 30,000 square foot building in the industrial district. The previous tenant had been a machine shop that went under during the recession, leaving behind good bones and broken dreams. The permit process nearly killed us before we started. Building inspector showed up with a clipboard and told us the electrical system wasn't up to code. 40 grand minimum for upgrade, money we didn't have. Devin spent 3 weeks digging through regulations, found an exemption that cut our costs in half. The electrical work revealed water damage and corroded connections. Equipment installation brought its own headaches. Our hydraulic lift arrived with transmission problems nobody had mentioned. Jesse spent a week rebuilding the pump system while I calculated how much each day of delay was costing us. The first equipment test flooded half the shop floor with hydraulic fluid. Standing in that mess, watching $15,000 worth of raw material float away, I wondered if we were too stubborn or too stupid to succeed. Vernon walked the space with me, his experienced eye cataloging possibilities and problems. Needs work, he said, running his hand along a dusty workbench. And money, lots of money. I'd already run the numbers. Equipment, insurance, permits, payroll for the first 6 months. It would take every penny of my 401k and a second mortgage on the house. If this failed, I'd lose everything. Can we make it work? Vern looked at me with the expression he'd worn when I was a 23-year-old apprentice asking stupid questions. Rick, I've seen you rebuild a hydraulic press with nothing but hand tools and stubbornness. This is just a bigger version of the same problem. Jesse Martinez was the first to commit. Not just his skills, but his savings, $15,000 from his kid's college fund. My grandfather built aircraft engines for P-51 Mustangs, he told me over coffee. He said every part you make might be the one that brings someone home. I can't do that filling out timesheets every 15 minutes. Devin Walsh was harder to convince. Hanford's former quality manager. He'd been 3 years from full pension when Daxon eliminated his position. I think I'm tired of explaining to kids fresh out of college why their acceptable tolerance nearly got someone killed, he said, and invested $25,000, his entire severance package. Carmen Rodriguez brought aerospace connections and a reputation for solving impossible problems. She'd worked NASA contracts for 15 years, understood that some applications left no room for good enough. Frank Kowalski brought welding expertise and a Marine's attention to detail. Maria Santos handled regulatory compliance. Tony Kowalski had equipment contacts. By month's end, we had 6 core people, each bringing capital and capabilities. Not just employees, partners betting their futures on the belief that craftsmanship still mattered. Iron Hand Manufacturing, that's what we'd call it, because that's what we were. Iron hands in a digital world holding the line between efficiency and excellence. The first month nearly broke us. The hydraulic system failed during our initial equipment test, flooding half the shop floor. Jesse's first batch of parts came out 0.003 inches off spec, within tolerance for most applications, but not for aerospace. We had to scrap $8,000 worth of material and start over. I spent that night in the empty shop, staring at the bills and wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. The second mortgage payment was due in 2 weeks, and our cash flow looked like a flat line. That's when Frank Williams called. Rick, I heard about your little flood. You okay? Define okay. Still in business? Barely. Good. because I've got a problem that's worth $50,000 to whoever can solve it. Custom tooling for a medical device. 3 other shops have tried and failed. You interested? It was a lifeline, but it came with a catch. We had 2 weeks to deliver something that had stumped companies with 10 times our resources. What makes you think we can do it when they couldn't? Because they tried to solve it with computers. This is going to take human judgment and someone willing to break the rules. We got it done with 18 hours to spare. Maria's quality control system cost us $12,000 we didn't have, equipment that wouldn't directly generate revenue. But it caught a design flaw in Williams's project that would have caused mechanical failure after 6 months. This is why I chose you, Williams told me later. Anyone can make parts. You make parts I can trust with patients' lives. That success bought us breathing room, but just barely. By month 3, I was down to my last $2,000 and seriously considering asking Jim Grayson for an advance on future work. Then came the Midwest Manufacturing Expo. The expo was the last place I expected to run into my past. But there he was. Marcus Daxon himself, surrounded by a small crowd at the Hanford booth explaining their revolutionary efficiency metrics to potential clients. I was manning Iron Hand's modest display when Jim Grayson nudged me. You see who's holding court over there? Daxon spotted me before I could decide whether to approach. He excused himself from his audience and walked over, that practiced CEO smile firmly in place. Rick Mathers, I should have known. He looked around our booth. Clean, professional, but obviously small scale. Impressive little operation you've built. We do honest work, I said simply. I'm sure you do. But tell me, how long can you sustain this? No corporate backing, no economies of scale. What happens when your clients want to expand beyond what a boutique shop can handle? Before I could answer, Frank Williams appeared at my elbow. Marcus, isn't it? I've been wanting to meet you. Williams's voice carried the kind of polite menace that comes from holding all the cards. I wanted to thank you for making my decision so easy. Daxon's smile flickered. I'm not sure I follow. When your people suggested I switch to standard parts for my medical devices, it clarified something for me. You don't understand the difference between cost and value. Williams gestured toward our booth. These people do. That's why they'll still be here when your efficiency metrics become someone else's problem. Mr. Williams, I think there's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding. Your company lost 4 of my contracts because you confused data with wisdom. Rick here understands that precision is a philosophy, not just a specification. Daxon's face had lost some of its polished composure. He turned back to me. You know, Rick, we could still work something out. Hanford could use someone with your perspective. Mr. Daxon, I said, keeping my voice level, I appreciate the offer, but I work for people who value craftsmanship over optimization. That's not negotiable. He nodded slowly, then extended his hand. Well then, may the best approach win. I shook it. It already has. 6 months later, Iron Hand Manufacturing had 15 employees and a 3-month backlog. We'd landed contracts with 2 major automotive suppliers and 1 aerospace company. Not because we were cheaper, we weren't. Not because we were faster, though we often were. Because we were better. But it wasn't all success stories. Tommy Richardson, one of our original investors, had left after 3 months when his wife got sick and they needed steady insurance coverage. We'd lost a contract with Midwest Steel when a quality control mistake cost us credibility and $50,000 in replacement parts. The real vindication came when Frank Williams called me on a Thursday afternoon. Rick, I just got off the phone with Hanford's new account manager. Kid named Peterson who took over from Brad. Morrison's gone? Fired last month. Apparently, he lost 4 major accounts in 6 weeks and tried to blame it on market conditions. Frank chuckled. Anyway, this Peterson kid wants to win back our business. Offered to cut prices by 30% and throw in free expedited shipping. What'd you tell him? I told him that quality isn't negotiable when lives depend on it. And if he doesn't understand that philosophy, he's talking to the wrong customer. That night, I made it home by 7. Liam was in the garage working on his motorcycle with tools I'd taught him to use. Max was at the kitchen table, building something complex with his Lego Technic set. A gear system that would have impressed any engineer. How was work, Dad? Max asked. Complicated, buddy. But good. Are we still going to be okay? I looked at my youngest son, this kid who'd watched his dad tear down his entire life and try to build something better from the pieces. Behind him on the refrigerator was a drawing he'd made titled, My Dad the Builder, showing a stick figure version of me surrounded by machinery. Yeah, Max, we're going to be okay. Different than before, maybe. But okay. Liam looked up from his motorcycle, grease smudged on his cheek. Dad, I'm sorry I gave you grief about quitting Hanford. I didn't understand. Understand what? That sometimes you have to break something to fix it. He gestured toward the engine he'd been rebuilding. This motor ran like crap when I got it. Had to tear it down to the block before I could make it right. We ate dinner together that night. All three of us at the same table talking about school and baseball and whether the Lions would ever win a playoff game. Normal stuff. Family stuff. Later, after the boys were in bed, I stood in my garage looking at the Camaro. 25 years I'd been promising to finish that restoration. 25 years of someday and when I have time. Need a hand? Liam appeared in the doorway, wiping grease from his fingers with an old shop rag. Together, we worked on the carburetor, me teaching him the things my father had taught me, him showing me techniques he'd learned from YouTube videos. Different generations, same language, the precise click of a wrench finding its grip, the satisfaction of an engine finally turning over clean. "Dad," Liam said as we cleaned our tools, "what are you going to do when the Camaro's finished?" I thought about it. Find another project, I guess. Something we can work on together. Like what? I don't know yet. But I've got time to figure it out. The Camaro's running now. Took me 8 months of evenings and weekends, but she purrs like the day she rolled off the line. Liam helped with the engine rebuild. Max designed a custom gear shift knob with CAD software he taught himself. We took her out for a drive last Sunday, all three of us crammed into that old muscle car, windows down and the radio up. In my rearview mirror, I could see the city skyline, the industrial district where Hanford still struggled with their efficiency optimization and where Iron Hand Manufacturing was building something that might last. I didn't look back for long. The road ahead was too interesting.